I should have seen it coming the moment Director Carter Hoffman walked into my office that Tuesday morning, his expression tight with barely concealed irritation. 3 years at Southgate Technologies had taught me to read the subtle shifts in management moods, the way power dynamics played out in conference rooms and corner offices. But nothing quite prepared me for what he was about to say. "Jessy, we need to talk about your role." He didn't sit down, didn't soften the blow with pleasantries. My hand stilled over my keyboard. The quarterly report I'd been finalizing, ahead of schedule, naturally, suddenly felt insignificant. "Of course. What's on your mind?" "You're too methodical for this position." The words came out sharp, almost accusatory. "The team needs someone with more spontaneity. More creative energy." Too methodical. The phrase hung in the air between us like an indictment. I'd built my entire career on being methodical, on anticipating problems before they materialized, on creating systems that prevented chaos. And now, apparently, that was a flaw. "I see." I kept my voice neutral, professional. Years of navigating corporate politics had taught me when to fight and when to observe. "What exactly are you proposing?" "We're reassigning your responsibilities. Effective immediately." He glanced at his watch, already mentally moving on to his next meeting. "Victoria will be taking over project coordination. You'll shift to data analysis support, helping her with metrics and reporting." Victoria Langford. 26, fresh from business school, all confidence and buzzwords with exactly 18 months of real-world experience. She'd spent the last 3 months shadowing me, asking questions about workflow optimization and stakeholder management, scribbling notes in her leather-bound planner like she was documenting ancient wisdom. I'd trained her. And now she was replacing me. Understood. The word tasted bitter, but I smiled anyway. "I'll begin the transition documentation immediately." Hoffman seemed almost disappointed by my compliance. Had he expected tears? Anger? Perhaps he'd rehearsed a speech about adapting to change and being a team player. Instead, I gave him nothing but calm professionalism. "Good. Victoria will meet with you this afternoon to go over the handoff." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "This isn't personal, Jessy. It's about what the department needs right now." Of course it wasn't personal. It never is when they're dismantling your career. After he left, I sat motionless for exactly 60 seconds, allowing myself that brief window to feel the full weight of humiliation and fury. Then I opened my laptop and began documenting everything. People underestimate documentation. They see it as bureaucratic busywork, tedious checkbox exercises that slow down real productivity. But documentation is power. It's institutional memory. It's the difference between organizational knowledge and organizational chaos. I'd spent 3 years building systems at Southgate Technologies. Not just processes, but architectures of efficiency. The project tracking framework that reduced missed deadlines by 47%. The vendor management protocols that saved the company 6 figures annually. The risk assessment matrices that prevented disasters before they reached crisis stage. All of it documented. All of it transferable. All of it about to be handed over to someone who'd never managed a project through a full lifecycle. Victoria arrived at 2:30, radiating enthusiasm that felt almost aggressive. Her perfectly styled auburn hair and designer blazer screamed ambition. She carried the same leather planner, now bristling with colorful tabs. "Jessy. I'm so excited about this opportunity." She settled into the chair across from my desk, crossing her legs with practiced poise. "I've learned so much from watching you work. You're incredibly thorough." Thorough. The diplomatic cousin of methodical. "Thank you. I prepared transition materials for all active projects." I slid a thick binder across the desk, followed by a USB drive. "This contains detailed timelines, stakeholder contact information, budget tracking, and risk assessments for each initiative. The digital files include templates for all recurring reports and communications." She glanced at the binder with something approaching alarm. "Oh. That's comprehensive." "The Phoenix client launch is our highest priority," I continued, keeping my tone informative rather than instructive. "They're 3 weeks from go-live, with final testing scheduled to begin Monday. The vendor dependencies are mapped in Section 4, with escalation protocols in Section 5. "Right. Victoria flipped through pages, her confidence flickering. And you've been handling all of this yourself? With support from the implementation team, yes. The key is maintaining clear communication channels and anticipating bottlenecks before they impact timeline. I pointed to a color-coded chart. These yellow flags indicate areas requiring daily monitoring this week. Red flags need immediate attention if any variables change. For the next 90 minutes, I walked her through 3 years of operational knowledge. She took notes, asked occasional questions, and gradually looked more overwhelmed. By the time we finished, her initial enthusiasm had cooled into something resembling apprehension. This is a lot to absorb, she admitted, closing her planner with a soft thud. You'll do fine. I meant it, actually. Victoria was smart, capable, and eager. What she lacked was experience, the kind that only comes from managing disasters at 3 a.m., from negotiating with impossible stakeholders, from learning that planning prevents 90% of crises. Just stick to the documented processes for now. They exist for a reason. She smiled, relieved by my encouragement. I really appreciate your help with this transition. I know it must be awkward. Awkward. Such a gentle word for professional evisceration. We're all here to support the department's success, I said, because what else could I say? That evening, I updated my resume for the first time in 3 years. My partner, Riley, found me at the kitchen table surrounded by printed spreadsheets and highlighted documents, evidence of my methodical nature spread across every surface. That bad? Riley set down 2 glasses of wine, settling into the chair beside me. He called me too methodical. I laughed, but it came out hollow. 3 years of preventing problems, and apparently that's a negative trait now. What's Victoria's background? Business school, some consulting work, a brief stint at a startup that folded. I took a long sip of wine. She's bright. Confident. Hoffman probably sees himself in her, all vision and instinct, unencumbered by tedious attention to detail. So he's an idiot. He's a director who's about to learn an expensive lesson. I pulled up my laptop, showing Riley the transition documentation. I handed over everything. Every process, every contact, every potential risk. If something goes wrong, it won't be because I didn't provide the tools for success. Riley studied my face with that particular expression reserved for moments when I was pretending to be fine. You're furious. I'm professional. I closed the laptop. There's a difference. But Riley was right. Beneath the calm exterior, I was seething. Not just at Hoffman's dismissive attitude or the demotion disguised as reassignment, but at the casual way organizations discard expertise in favor of flash. The way competence gets punished while mediocrity gets promoted. The way being good at your job somehow becomes a liability. The next morning, I arrived at my new workspace, a smaller desk in the data analysis bullpen, surrounded by junior analysts who seemed confused by my sudden appearance among their ranks. My old office, with its window view and door that closed, now belonged to Victoria. I spent the day building reports, running metrics, doing work that challenged exactly none of my skills. By lunch, I'd completed everything on my assignment list and sat staring at my monitor, wondering if this was what career death felt like. Around 3 o'clock, Victoria stopped by, her heels clicking against the floor with purposeful rhythm. Quick question about the Phoenix launch: what's the escalation protocol if the vendor misses the testing window? I pulled up the documentation on my screen. Section 5, page 37. If they miss Friday's deadline, we activate the backup vendor per the contingency contract negotiated in March. Contact information for both parties is in the appendix. Oh. She peered at the screen, frowning. I saw that, but I thought maybe there was some unofficial process? Something you normally do that isn't written down? Everything is written down, I said gently. That's why documentation exists. She left looking vaguely dissatisfied, and I understood why. Victoria wanted the secret knowledge, the insider tricks that separated good managers from great ones. She didn't yet understand that there were no secrets, just disciplined execution of boring, methodical processes. The second day followed the same pattern. I completed my assigned tasks by mid-morning and spent the afternoon responding to Victoria's increasingly frequent questions. By the third day, I'd created a spreadsheet tracking her inquiries, 12 on Wednesday, 17 on Thursday, 23 by Friday afternoon. That's when Hoffman came running. I was reviewing a budget variance analysis when I heard the commotion, raised voices from the direction of the executive offices, hurried footsteps in the corridor. Then Hoffman appeared in the bullpen doorway, his usually impeccable appearance disheveled, tie loosened, face flushed. "Jessy." He scanned the room until his eyes found me. "My office. Now." The junior analysts exchanged glances as I stood, their curious expressions following us down the hallway. Hoffman's office door stood open, and through it I could see Victoria sitting across from his desk, her confident posture collapsed into something resembling panic. "Explain to me," Hoffman said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger, "why the Phoenix client just called to inform me that testing was supposed to begin on Monday and we're not ready. Why our vendor contact says they've been trying to reach the project manager for 2 days with no response. Why 3 other project deadlines were missed this week without anyone notifying the clients." I looked at Victoria, whose face had gone pale. She stared at her planner like it might offer salvation. "I don't understand what happened," she whispered. "Everything was supposed to be on track." "Supposed to be?" Hoffman's voice rose. "We've got contracts at stake." Jessy was handling all of this flawlessly, and now, he stopped, seeming to realize what he'd just said. "Where's the breakdown?" I could have stayed silent. Could have let Victoria drown in the consequences of her inexperience and his poor judgment. But despite everything, I didn't want to watch someone else's career implode, especially when the real failure belonged to leadership. "May I?" I gestured toward Hoffman's computer. He nodded, moving aside. I pulled up the shared project drive, navigating to the Phoenix folder. Testing was scheduled to begin Monday, which requires the vendor to deliver final specifications by Friday at 5 p.m. According to the documentation, that deadline is today. The vendor sent specifications Wednesday evening, 48 hours early. Victoria's eyes widened. "They did? I didn't see any email." "They sent it to the project coordinator email account," I continued, pulling up the inbox. "Right here." The auto-response indicates the message was received but not yet reviewed. I scrolled through dozens of unread emails, each one flagged with varying levels of urgency. The vendor sent a follow-up yesterday afternoon. And another this morning. All unread. Hoffman's jaw tightened. Why wasn't the inbox being monitored? "The monitoring protocol is documented in Section 2 of the transition materials," I said evenly. Project Coordinator Role Responsibilities, page 14. Daily inbox review is the first task every morning, with priority flags requiring response within 4 hours. I pulled up 3 other project folders, demonstrating the same pattern: missed communications, ignored deadlines, stakeholders left waiting for responses that never came. Each failure traced back to basic processes that weren't being followed, procedures that existed precisely to prevent these situations. "I documented everything," Victoria said, her voice small. "I took notes during the transition. I've been following the processes." "Which processes?" I asked, keeping my tone gentle. "Show me your workflow for this week." She opened her leather planner, and I understood immediately. She'd created her own system, abandoning the documented procedures in favor of handwritten task lists and personal reminders. Everything I'd built to create organizational resilience had been replaced with individual heroics, the exact approach that guarantees failure at scale. "The systems exist because I tested them over 3 years," I explained, addressing both Victoria and Hoffman. "They're not suggestions or bureaucratic overhead. They're the difference between controlled execution and chaos. When you ignore the boring parts, the daily inbox checks, the status update protocols, the stakeholder communication rhythms, everything breaks down simultaneously." Hoffman sank into his chair, the full scope of his mistake visibly settling over him. "Can you fix this?" "I can." The answer came without hesitation. "The Phoenix launch is recoverable, the vendor specifications are acceptable, we can begin testing Monday as planned if we respond by end of business today. The other projects need immediate stakeholder communication and revised timelines, but nothing is catastrophic yet." "Yet," Hoffman repeated, the word heavy with implication. "I'll need access restored to all project systems and authorization to communicate directly with clients and vendors." I met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away. "And I'll need Victoria to work alongside me through the recovery process so she can see how the systems function under pressure." Victoria looked up, surprised. She'd expected to be thrown under the bus, sacrificed to protect my ego or punish her for taking my role. Instead, I was offering her a lifeline, not out of generosity, but because destroying her career wouldn't fix the structural problem. Fine. Hoffman stood, decision made. Whatever you need. Just fix this. I worked until midnight that night, and through most of the weekend. Victoria shadowed me as I'd promised, watching as I systematically addressed each crisis with the same methodical approach Hoffman had dismissed as a weakness. By Monday morning, Phoenix testing was underway, stakeholders had been briefed on revised timelines, and the organizational fires had been contained. More importantly, Victoria understood something she hadn't before, that boring, methodical processes weren't obstacles to success but foundations for it. That documentation wasn't bureaucratic waste but institutional wisdom. That the unglamorous work of maintenance and monitoring prevented far more problems than heroic last-minute interventions could ever solve. On Tuesday, exactly 1 week after that initial conversation, Hoffman called me back to his office. This time, the tone was different, less command, more request. I made a mistake, he said without preamble. A significant one. I prioritized the wrong qualities and nearly cost us major contracts because of it. I waited, saying nothing. I want you back in your original role, effective immediately. Victoria will return to her previous position, with a focus on learning the operational fundamentals before taking on project coordination again. He paused, clearly uncomfortable with the vulnerability of admission. I also want to discuss a promotion, Associate Director of Project Operations. You've earned it. The vindication should have felt sweet. Instead, I mostly felt tired. I appreciate that, I said carefully. But I need to understand something first. What changed? Because a week ago, being methodical was a liability. Now it's promotion-worthy? Hoffman had the grace to look ashamed. I confused energy with effectiveness. Enthusiasm with expertise. I saw someone who reminded me of my younger self and assumed that made her ready for responsibility she hadn't earned yet. He met my eyes. I won't make that mistake again. It's not about Victoria, I said. She's talented and she'll be excellent once she has the experience. The problem is that organizations constantly undervalue the quiet competence that keeps everything running. We celebrate the visible wins while ignoring the invisible work that makes those wins possible. You're right. He leaned back in his chair. So teach me. Help me understand what I should be looking for, how to better evaluate the work that happens behind the scenes. It was a fair request, and more self-awareness than most executives managed. I'll take the promotion, I said. And I'll work with Victoria to develop her skills properly. But I need your commitment that methodical, detail-oriented work will be valued in this department, not just tolerated. You have it. We shook hands, and I returned to my office, my actual office, with the window and the door that closed, to find a note from Victoria on my desk. Thank you for not letting me drown. I learned more this week than in my entire MBA program. I smiled despite myself. Maybe some good would come from this disaster after all. That evening, Riley found me at the kitchen table again, but this time I was reorganizing my project files rather than updating my resume. So? Riley prompted, pouring wine without being asked. Associate Director of Project Operations. 12% raise, expanded team, and Hoffman's commitment to value the boring work. That's good, right? Riley studied my expression. You don't look particularly thrilled. I'm pleased. I closed my laptop, accepting the wine. But it's strange. I didn't fix anything that wasn't already broken by ignoring the systems I'd built. All I did was demonstrate that the procedures worked when actually followed. The fact that this warrants a promotion says something about how undervalued that work was in the first place. So you saved the day by being exactly who you've always been. More or less. I raised my glass in a mock toast. To being too methodical. Riley clinked glasses with me, grinning. To being right when it counts. The following weeks brought the kind of satisfaction that comes from watching systems work as designed. Victoria threw herself into learning with genuine humility, absorbing not just the processes but the philosophy behind them. She started catching problems before they escalated, building her own documentation, asking questions that revealed deeper understanding rather than surface confusion. Hoffman, true to his word, began recognizing operational excellence in department meetings, highlighting the work that prevented crises rather than just celebrating dramatic recoveries. He asked better questions, dug deeper into how work actually got done, and slowly rebuilt his evaluation framework around substance rather than style. 3 months later, I sat in a conference room with the executive team, presenting the operational improvements that had increased our project success rate by 32% and reduced client escalations by half. The presentation was detailed, data-driven, and thoroughly documented, exactly the kind of methodical analysis that had nearly cost me my career. When I finished, the chief operating officer leaned forward with genuine interest. "This is impressive work. How long did it take to build these systems?" 3 years of iteration and refinement, I answered. With about a week of crisis management that proved they actually worked. A few people laughed, but I saw understanding in their eyes. They got it, the investment required to build institutional resilience, the patience needed to let systems mature, the discipline to maintain processes even when they felt tedious. After the meeting, Hoffman walked with me back toward my office. "I keep thinking about what you said," he admitted. "About organizations undervaluing quiet competence. I've been in leadership for 15 years, and I still almost made a catastrophic mistake because I couldn't see the difference between performance and effectiveness." "Most people can't," I said. "We're wired to respond to what's visible and dramatic. The crisis that gets resolved feels more important than the crisis that never happens because someone did boring preventive work. It's why firefighters get more recognition than building inspectors, even though good inspection prevents more damage than any fire department can contain." "So how do we fix it?" I considered the question seriously. "Stop treating methodology as bureaucracy. Start asking what prevents problems as often as you ask what solves problems. Recognize that expertise isn't just about knowing what to do in a crisis, it's about building systems that reduce how often crises happen." I paused at my office door. "And maybe trust that the people doing the unglamorous work know something valuable about how things actually function." Hoffman nodded slowly. "I'll work on it." He would, I believed. Not perfectly, not without setbacks, but with genuine intention. Some lessons require expensive mistakes to stick. That night, Riley asked me if I felt vindicated, if watching Hoffman scramble to fix his own disaster had satisfied my anger. Honestly? I thought about it. I feel relieved. Not because I got my role back or earned a promotion, but because the systems worked. That's what matters, not my ego, not proving I was right, but knowing that the work I put in actually accomplished what it was supposed to accomplish. That's very mature of you. Riley smirked. Also very on-brand for someone described as too methodical. I'll embrace it. I laughed. Methodical got me through the crisis. Methodical rebuilt the trust. Methodical works even when it's not flashy. To being methodical, then. Riley raised a coffee mug in mock salute. To being methodical, I agreed. The most underrated superpower in business. Looking back now, 6 months after that initial confrontation in my office, I can see the pattern clearly. Organizations constantly make this mistake, prioritizing charisma over competence, novelty over reliability, vision over execution. They confuse the appearance of leadership with the substance of it, celebrating people who talk about innovation while overlooking those who actually maintain the infrastructure that makes innovation possible. But here's what I've learned: the methodical approach always wins eventually. Not because it's dramatic or exciting, but because it's sustainable. Because systems outlast individuals. Because documented knowledge transfers when people leave. Because preventing 90% of crises is infinitely more valuable than heroically resolving the 10% that slip through. The director reassigned my responsibilities because I was too methodical. 3 days later, he ran back panicked because nothing worked without that methodology. And in that panic, he learned what I'd known all along, that the boring, detail-oriented, systematic work isn't a barrier to success, it's the foundation everything else is built on. Some people need to watch the building burn before they appreciate the inspector who tried to prevent the fire. I'd rather be the inspector, doing the unglamorous work that keeps everyone safe, even if no one notices until it's almost too late. That's what being methodical means. That's what being good at this job requires. And that's what I'll keep doing, with or without recognition, because some of us understand that the real work happens in the details everyone else wants to skip. Is that too methodical? Perhaps. But I'm fine with that now. Because when the chaos inevitably comes, they'll know exactly who to call. And I'll be ready, systems documented and processes proven, doing what I've always done, keeping everything running while others take the credit. Until they need me again. Which they will. They always do.